Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the LifeSpeed webinar series. My name is Stephanie. I'll be around for the entire webinar if you guys have any questions. We do expect that the webinar is going to take the entire time here, but we can pause every now and then to take some questions as they come in. We'll also do a live Q&A at the very end of the webinar, so submit those questions to us. You can use the questions box to the right-hand side of your screen. Just click on that button to type. Our host today is Mr. Roland Cuellar, presenting on a portion of the business agility topic. This time it's 5 Agile metrics to drive business agility. So remember to submit those questions as we go along, and we'll have that live Q&A when we close. I believe we are ready to kick off. Thanks, Roland.
Okay, thanks a lot, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. Glad you could make it on this Friday afternoon. I should say first off that maybe the title might be a little bit off. I'm probably going to talk about more than 5 metrics, but I do want to focus more on the business agility side of things and looking at the overall impact to the business. So let's go ahead and dive into this. It's obviously a very complicated topic, and there's a lot of potential metrics out there. So I'm going to be talking maybe a little bit about even how to think about the metrics and how to use them, I think, in smarter ways. A little bit of introduction there about myself. I'm the Vice President of our Digital Transformation Consulting practice here at LifeSpeed. Focus a lot on organizational change and process design and working with leaders to get Agile up and running in their organizations. All right. The first thing I want to focus on really is how to use metrics to really help Agile to work as it should. I think we all understand that Agile is a feedback-based system. The idea is that we create things quickly, we get feedback on the things that we create, and we use the data that comes back from the feedback system in order to change and pivot and improve and iterate towards our goals. And so in order for this feedback system to work, we need to get feedback, we need to get it somewhat quickly. And we need to use those metrics to help us in making the decisions, real-time decisions that we need in order to pivot towards improved business outcomes, improved customer satisfaction, improved quality, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, what really matters to us are those business results and those customer results. One of the issues, though, with traditional software development and even Agile software development, if it's not done well, is that really long lead times, the time that it takes to go from an initial idea to deployment, if that's a really long time, it makes measuring performance very difficult to do. There's such a gap in time between when you wanted to do something and when it actually happens, that oftentimes you sometimes have moved on to other things and are no longer focused on that particular item. Or the business conditions have changed, or new priorities have come up, et cetera, et cetera. And it just becomes what's in production becomes very dissociated from the ideas that we may have had sometimes months ago. And so I really want to do is have us focus on the overall value stream and what it takes to go from idea to production, and focus more on that than measuring any particular individual silo. So. A couple of do's and don'ts. Really want to maybe caution people from locally optimizing their particular function. The value stream to go from idea to delivery is really long. The businesses involved, we have to go through funding cycles, the PMO, high-level requirements, detailed requirements, development, testing, deployment, all of that stuff. And if you try to locally optimize any one of those functions, if you try to make it perfect, that will end up slowing down the steps coming into that function or coming out of that function. I think we've all heard in the past and have probably experienced situations where locally optimizing something was great for that particular function, but it's detrimental to the overall throughput of the process. So we really want to focus on overall value stream throughput and not making each and every individual function perfect. That will actually lead to diminished results. We do want to change the goals over time. I want to really emphasize the point that we should be using metrics and measurement to impact particular problems or opportunities that we're having right now. And those problems and opportunities will change over time. So I do like to see that the metrics are actually changing, and what we're measuring 6 months from now or a year from now might be different because the situations have changed. Don't get stuck in just measuring the same thing year after year after year. I've talked about the next one already, looking at the entire value stream and really focusing the measurement system on the bottlenecks and the problem areas and the major delays that are keeping us from getting things into production quickly. And finally, I do want to talk a little bit at the end about how we use metrics to change overall organizational behavior and culture. Once again, when we focus on the value stream and not individual silos, we can use metrics to sort of change how the organization thinks about the delivery and start to pull them together. One of the things about locally optimizing and just measuring a particular function is that you become an island unto yourself, and you're only trying to hit your numbers, and only your numbers matter, and no one else's numbers matter. And that leads to all manner of bad behaviors. But if I can measure up at a higher level and measure across that value stream, that forces us to have to work together on stuff. So we'll talk about a little bit about that at the end, and we'll talk about a couple of some of the masters that we've worked with in the past. We've had the fortunate situations to work with in the past and show how they used metrics to drive some organizational change. Okay, I'm going to submit to you that probably the thing that's most important to focus on and the thing that's most important to measure is probably something that very few of us actually measure, and that is measuring what it is we're going to build. So let's talk about the money here, because the economics are extremely important. Let's just say that I've got a team of 10 people and they're working on a 2-week sprint. That's 80 hours. And maybe they have a fully loaded cost of $150 per hour per person. You know, that may not be the actual salaries of people, but after you put in all the vacation time and sick time and equipment and real estate and holidays and overhead and all the other benefits and things that it takes to run the organization, maybe that's the fully loaded cost. And that's even going to be low in some markets. Here in the Washington, D.C. area, where I'm talking to you from, that fully loaded cost would actually be higher than this probably. That comes out to be about $120,000 per sprint per team. And that's just one team. Imagine if you've got 4 teams, then that's still a pretty small organization. 4 teams would be burning through $500,000 every 2 weeks. So the economics here are just staggering, and it's crazy. Having custom software developed is an extraordinarily expensive endeavor, and we need to use that cost very wisely. And so, Stephanie, if you could go ahead and launch our first polling question. I'd like to ask you, how many of you have ever developed a significant piece of software, technology, etc., and it really ended up not being used that much? Put a lot of time and effort into building something, launching it, getting it out there, and maybe that functionality turned out to not really be as highly utilized as you thought it would be, or as your organization thought that it would be. So why don't we go ahead and get those answers, and Stephanie, once we have the results, will let us know, and we'll go ahead and share the outcomes.
Sure, I'll just wait a couple more seconds here. We've got a little bit, couple of people still voting. All right.
All right. So, and this is pretty typical. Here we have about 80% of us, with 5% being unsure that they've ever, developed a significant piece of software or technology or product, whatever that is, and the results of that product weren't really used as much as we thought it would be. And herein lies probably the biggest problem that we have and the biggest opportunity for measurement. We talk here on this slide, and I talk to clients about how crazy expensive it is to have software developed for you. And then we end up asking teams to develop software that really doesn't end up getting used. And that happens a lot. And so that's a huge opportunity. And so I want to talk a little bit about putting more measurement focus on what it is that we build exactly. here's a little bit of data from a gentleman at who's experienced with Microsoft and Amazon, Ronnie Kohavi, and he says about a third of the ideas have a significantly, a statistically significant positive change for the business. We get the outcomes that we had hoped to. About a third of our ideas don't really result in a statistically significant difference in the business outcomes we had hoped to achieve. And some of the stuff, another third of the stuff actually makes the business situation worse. So a full 2/3 of the ideas that we have for features and functionality and capabilities either don't really contribute to positive business outcome, or in some cases actually make things worse. And so because of the economics of software development, there's a huge focus on how do I get the teams to go faster? How do I develop more? How do we improve our productivity and all of these things? And I would say that the biggest opportunity for going faster and getting greater business results is focusing more of our time on what we build, and actually how can we build less, and how can we discover that third of the ideas that are actually going to produce the outcome that we're looking for. So here's a little scenario for us to consider. Imagine you deliver some project of some sort, and it has 100 new features and other changes and bug fixes and whatnot. And usage of the product is measurably up, and maybe the customer satisfaction is up, and a variety of things are up. And so the question on the table is, is this project successful? And most of us, I think, would probably say, yeah, that's a great outcome. We got the things that we were looking for out of this project. But here's the question. Given that 2/3 of our ideas or changes fail to produce the intended business outcome, is it possible that we could have gotten the same bump up in usage and customer satisfaction by only delivering 1/3 of those features and only spending 1/3 of that money and getting it done 2/3 faster? That's the question that I think a lot of us are unable to always answer. And what I'd like to propose is that we need to be more discreet about what we build and what we deploy and what we measure, so that we can start to learn at a finer grained level, well below the granularity of the full project, what sort of features are really impactful to our customers. And we may be able to get the same business results with a lot less time and a lot less money and a lot less work by actually delivering less and being smarter about what it is that we deliver. Okay, so how do I do that? There's some tools out there for helping us to measure these things. We're often used to thinking in the Agile world about the backlog, and the backlog is just a huge, oftentimes huge wish list of all the things that we want our product or project to do. And sometimes just managing this enormous backlog is an enormous endeavor in and of itself. It's interesting to think about how backlogs are created in many organizations. And sometimes we sort of just ask all of our stakeholders and customers what they want, and all that stuff goes into the backlog, and then we got to figure out how to deliver it. And that's fine. It just often results in really huge products that are really expensive, that take a really long time to complete, if we're thinking at in terms of projects. I don't know, there's other ways to think about that. We did a webinar just a week ago on the topic of impact mapping, and how we can use impact mapping to drive to more granularity of what is really going to be useful and impactful to the business, and what features and functionalities we can put into the hands of customers that will help us achieve the business goals that we are trying to achieve. And so now we're starting to get to, what are the business outcomes I'm looking for, and what specific features will get us there, which is a little bit more, I guess, a little more analytical way of figuring out what we're going to build, other than just sort of asking everybody what they want and putting it in a huge list and calling that the backlog. Let's say that I go through the impact mapping, or even if I do have a backlog, how can I measure in some analytical way, some rational way, what it is that we should deliver. Oftentimes, it's interesting to think about how we prioritize the backlog. And sometimes there are very clear and rational ways to do that. Other times it's just sort of who yells the loudest, or who's the most powerful person in the room, or who's our biggest customer, or some of those kind of things. And it's not that those things don't have some validity to them, but there are other ways to think about it. One of the ways to think about it is from the work of Don Reinertsen, and using the cost of delay as a way to prioritize the backlog for maximum business impact. And so, but how do I minimize the cost of delay when I don't know what the cost of delay is? Well, there's a tool and a technique out there called weighted shortest job first. And first of all, this graphic has a slight error in it. In the gray box, it says WSFJ, and it should say WSJF, weighted shortest job first. And there's an equation for that. And basically, this is a measure of bang for the buck. On the top, in the numerator of this equation, is the bang, or the upside to the business, and down in the denominator is the bucks, basically the size of the job, in order to get this feature or functionality out there. And so the weighted shortest job first, it says, is the business value plus the time criticality plus the risk reduction or opportunity enablement, the sum of all that divided by the job size. Well, here's the thing. I don't know any of that. I don't know how to measure the business value. I don't know how many dollars we're going to get in revenue out of this new feature, or how many new users it's going to attract. I don't know what the time criticality is. How do I measure that? And the size of the job, we're terrible at estimating. I don't know that to any great deal of precision either. Well, the beauty of this equation is I don't actually have to know any of that information in order to still make economically rational decisions. I can use point values, relative point estimation for all of these, and get economically reasonable results without having to know dollars or time or any of that. So down in the bottom is this table that has a list of features, F1, F2, and F3. And what we're going to do is just go in column order and compare each feature to the other features in the list and just give them point values. In the first case, for the user business value. What we're going to say is, in this case, feature 2 is kind of low from a user business value standpoint. It only gets 1 point. But feature number 2 gets 1 point. Feature number 1 is significantly more user business value. It gets 5 points. And feature number 3 has the most business value out of these 3. It gets 10 points of user business value. And we're just saying feature 3 that's a whopper, man. People really are going to derive great value from that feature. And so we just compare these features to each other and give them point values. Then we go to the next column, time criticality. Feature number 1 is the most time critical, though. It doesn't have the most user business value, but there are reasons to do it sooner rather than later. And it's 5 times as many points from a time criticality standpoint as the other 2 features. Feature 2 and 3 only get 1 point in that second column because it doesn't really matter when we do those particular features. Those are at our discretion. In the third column, we rank them on risk reduction or opportunity enablement. Maybe some of these features, if we were to get them developed or deployed, would reduce risks that we have to the organization, or create opportunities for us, or open up some doors for us. And we can rank them that way. Now I've got all this data, and I can just add all those up. And the sum of all 3 of those columns is the cost of delay. And so there's a column in the middle called COD, and that's the cost of delay. And so now I've got point values for all of those. And what I'm going to do is divide the cost of delay by the size of the job, because the size of the job sort of is an estimate of our cost to deliver. Time is money here, basically. And once again, I don't know how long it's going to take us to deliver these things exactly, or how much it's going to cost, but I can use point values again, and I can say that feature number 1 is pretty small. We can get that done relatively quickly. It's a 1-pointer. Feature number 3 is a 5-pointer. It's going to take quite a bit longer. And so now I have all the information that I need, and I can calculate the weighted shortest job first. And the winner in this case is actually feature number 1, gets 11 points. And you can see that feature number 2 gets 1.5 points, and feature 3 is 3 points. This is an interesting way to think about it, because oftentimes we are taught to maximize business value. And so in this case, if we were to only look at business value, we might choose feature number 3 to do first, because it's got 10 points of user value, right? It's actually the most impactful from a user business value standpoint. But because of these other factors like time criticality or risk reduction or job size, this equation says we should do feature number 1 first, because it's so small. It's got a medium business value, but it's tiny in terms of how long it will take us to get it done. And so we can start to derive economic benefits almost immediately if we do feature number 1 first instead of feature number 3 first. So this is a way to think about how to prioritize and sequence our features for maximum impact to our organization. And I have sat with managers and leaders as they walk through and just talked about all the features that are on the table or capabilities that are on the table, and had these discussions and used this to determine what the next feature to launch should be. It's a great tool for bringing out discussions of all of these factors and making decisions that are at least somewhat economically rational. And I would submit to you that this is probably the most important metric that you need to do, because the biggest upside, I think, in improving our overall ability to deliver is to stop building things that we don't think customers actually want or use. As we all mentioned, that's a big problem for most of us. 80% of the folks felt that happens frequently. All right. So let's say that we go through that process and we now have a way of measuring what it is we're going to build. I would say the next thing that we want to build is obviously that outcome. What are the business outcomes that we hope to achieve, and how could we measure that? There's an important factor here, though, and that is measuring outcomes. While I think we would all agree is important, the big issue here is that it's a lagging indicator. We don't get this measurement until the requirements are done and the development is done and the testing is done and the deployment is done. And that can be sometimes a long time frame. And so we need to focus on solving that problem. There are many outcomes that we could measure from a business standpoint. We could measure the product, we could measure the customer, and we could measure the business impact. These are all worthy outcomes. In the product space, we might measure feature usage. How many times did people use this new feature that we just deployed? How much time did they spend with that feature? Like, is it of great use and value to them that they're spending time with it, or they clicked it once and kind of poked around at it and got out? Are we getting a lot of defect tickets because of the changes we've made? Are people spending more time with the application? How's the application performing? All of these things are sort of measures of the product outcome. Did our product improve, if you will? And then I can look at, customer outcomes as well. Am I getting a lot of help desk calls and tickets? Maybe people are saying things about us in social media, likes or dislikes. We're getting customer feedback from the phone or email or word on the street. Maybe there's news and press, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these things are, super important in terms of our marketing and our brand perception and all those sorts of things. And so, measuring that customer satisfaction and happiness is critical. And then, of course, there's the business outcomes themselves. Did we get the revenue we were looking for, or the cost savings we were looking for? Did our number of, trial accounts go up, or did number of paid accounts go up? Or am I losing customers, or customers are churning more or less? And, account renewals, are they up or down, or no impact whatsoever, et cetera? All of these things are potential outcomes that we could that we could measure. And one has to be wary of measuring everything under the sun, right? We can measure all of the stuff, and maybe to some extent we might need to measure several of these things, but you want to watch out from over measuring, I think, and focus on the problems that you know that you have, and trying to use your measurement tools to I think address more specific issues. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay. Now, when I'm able to start measuring at that level of granularity, in terms of, we just launched this feature. We went through the weighted shortest job first. We decided that feature number 1 was the one that was, or feature number 2, or whatever it was, is the one we're going to launch first. And we go and we build that feature and we deploy it. And now I'm able to learn very specifically what features really have the impact and performance improvements that we're looking for. Maybe we learn that certain kinds of features are extremely impactful, either from a positive or a negative standpoint, and other features, maybe they're, we don't understand them well yet. We don't understand our customers well enough yet, and they don't have the outcomes that we had thought that they would. And so, in that first box there, maybe features that impact performance, cause our session times to drop. People don't spend time with the application, and so that means that our ad revenue goes down. Or features related to some other part of the application are really wasteful. We spend a lot of time and money on them, and it turns out that they don't result in increased revenue or increased ad sales or increased time with the application, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm able to start learning at this feature by feature level what customers want and need, and what drives actual business performance. Okay. Now, as I said before, when we opened up, that Agile is a feedback-driven process, right? It uses data to determine what to do next. I like to think of it like a chess game. We make individual chess moves. We need to see what the opponents do, or in this case, what our customers do and our competitors do. And then we use that data to make our next move. And so there's this constant set of individual moves that you make that are executing your strategy and moving your product and your business in a certain direction. But for this feedback system, this chess game to be effective, I need to be able to get the data back quickly. And if it's a really long time from when I decide I want to develop something to when it's deployed in production, as I mentioned before, the measurement system starts to fall apart and the feedback system starts to fall apart. There's too great a time lag between when I want to do something and when I'm able to measure the outcome. And so measuring all these business outcomes that I just talked about are great. I mean, you have to do that. The problem is, I said before, that those are lagging indicators. They're after the fact. What are some leading indicators of performance? How can I use measurement to improve the feedback system and improve the data gathering system? I would submit to you that is a powerful way to think about the metrics and about the process, not to necessarily improve each individual step in the function, each individual functional silo, and that has its importance as well. But there's an overemphasis, I think, on making it, every manager focusing on their own numbers and their own silo and their own function, and not thinking about how do I improve and increase the overall throughput and feedback of this system so that the whole thing performs better. So that's what I want to talk about next in measuring the process. Okay, so fast feedback is required. What we want to do is get this granularity in measurement so that I can figure out, once again, at the feature level or user story level, if you like, what user stories and features are impactful, right? And it's difficult to discern the nuances if you're changing lots of things at the same time and deploying things in big batches. If I deploy a project with 100 changes in it, it can be a lot more difficult to figure out, well, which of those changes were really impactful? Could I have gotten the same business impact by only delivering half of that stuff or a third of that stuff. So we want to be able to deliver at the feature or MVP or story level and measure at the feature or MVP or story level. And when we do that, we'd like to be able to do that very quickly, that I can take one feature, one story, and run it through the whole process very quickly and get this granularity of delivery and granularity of measurement, right? Okay. So, we know the value stream can be really long, right? Way up front, coming up with business cases and getting funding and getting approval and getting resources and getting requirements and getting the team together and doing development and doing testing and then all the deployment and opportunities and steps along the way. This value stream can be really long, right? And underneath each of these steps here, each one of these things can be measured in huge detail. And as I've said before, I want to not focus on measuring everything that can be measured, but finding out where are the bottlenecks in this process, where do things really come to a halt, where we should focus the power of metrics on improving that step so that the overall throughput is faster, right? Also, we want to look at this overall value stream where, in terms of where big batches are being created. I would like to, as we said, deliver at the user story level or deliver at the feature level and have lots of small granular deliveries so that I can give immediate value to our customers and get immediate value back to our organization and be able to measure the impactfulness of that and use that as learning opportunity. Many of the CIOs and other leaders that we've worked with over the past have really focused on, I want to have far more granular delivery. They would use metrics to drive the organization in such a way that they're not going to fund things, they're not going to fund projects or other endeavors that don't deliver value back to the organization.
Hi, folks. We seem to have lost a little bit of audio here. Bear with us. We're going to try to troubleshoot.
I think we had a power failure. I'm going to try now. How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. It's windy here in the Washington, D.C. area, like exceedingly windy today, and we're having issues with the power going out around town, et cetera, et cetera. So I apologize for that. Hopefully we didn't lose too much there in terms of content. My point on this slide, though, really was that these metrics are all useful. I would use them and target them at specific issues and problems that you're having in the value stream. If we're finding lots of defects, If we're finding lots of defects, then obviously we want to use the measurement tools to shine a light on that and focus on that specifically. All right, I just want to make sure that we're still okay from a sound standpoint and that things are still working.
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Very good. Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. All right, so all these metrics are possible and available. Where do we start? Well, it's really around those bottlenecks. What are the choke points that are slowing down the delivery or causing us big batches? If we don't fix those, we're not going to get fast and discrete delivery, and we're not going to get fast and discrete measurement capability. And then we're never going to learn at a more granular, detailed level the right features to build in the right order to build them, and the ones that have the most impact to the business. Right? And those bottlenecks are not always in IT. I would encourage you to look upstream as well. We've worked with a number of customers over the years on focusing on the business side of agility. How long does it take to get an idea justified, approved, funded, resourced, started? All that kind of stuff can really be huge delays in delivery time. And if that's really causing your organization to be unagile or not agile, then you may want to focus your measurement tools at that part of the process. As it's often said, there's nothing agile about delivering something that someone asked for 6 months ago. And if you've got a 6-month lead time between an idea and when the team actually gets to start on it, that's a pretty long time frame. Wanted to show some examples here of how to make these metrics visible, how to turn them not just to have numbers, but I think to have visual impact as well, because the visual impact can be very powerful. We are visual creatures, visual animals. To the extent that we can see problems, it really highlights them and makes them very clear and important, more so sometimes than the numbers. So on the left-hand side, I've got a tool that I like to use with some clients around portfolio management. One should measure the portfolio if you feel that the portfolio is a problem. For instance, in most of the organizations that we work with, they have way too many projects going on at the same time, all competing for the same resources. Everyone's extraordinarily busy, but nothing's actually getting done. It's like having a really crowded highway where every car, if you thought of every car as a project and it's trying to get from the beginning of its journey to the end, I've got all these millions of cars on the highway and they're just inching along. And this is a huge problem I see in most of our organizations that we work with from a portfolio standpoint. Way too many projects, not enough people to support them all, and they're all inching along. The organization is spending huge amounts of money, but not actually delivering very much. So I like to use this tool on the left with our portfolio managers to show them in a very visual way the projects that are coming and the timing around those. Each of the sectors, each of the slices of pie, if you will, represents a different business area or business unit or part of the portfolio. One of those areas could be accounting projects, another one could be HR projects, another one could be product A and product B. And then the circles represent time frame. The circles in the middle are projects and efforts that are going on now or coming soon down the pike. And the circles that are way out towards the edges are projects or needs that are off in the future. And then each of the little cards, the little pink and yellow stickies, is a project or a request or some need, if you will. And you can see them all coming towards the center over time. And it's very easy to see that there's no way that we can support all of this stuff. If all of these projects come in and converge into the middle a few months from now, we're going to have 100 projects going on, and we can't do 100 projects at once. So this is a way to visualize and measure, around portfolio issues, for example. I worked with another client on the right-hand side, trying to get a handle on planability. And up at the top, it's hard to read, and I apologize because it's kind of in the shadows, but there's a white sheet of paper that says planned, and there's a white sheet of paper on the right-hand side that says unplanned. And this was just trying to work with the group to get a handle on, of all the things that they do, how much of it is planned and plannable, and how much of it is unplanned, ad hoc kinds of requests that come in. And you can see that the planned stuff there is dwarfed by the amount of unplanned stuff on the right. And so we needed to either come up with a different process for how to deal with this, or try to do a little bit more forward thinking with some of our stakeholders and customers to turn the unplanned work into plannable work. Maybe we can get out in front of some of this somehow. But these are both ways of measuring, somewhat informally, very specific problems, and trying to make those problems clear and apparent to everybody. These tools are just out there on the walls, and everyone can see them, and people walk by them and then just say, wow, I really see it now. Right. Here's a couple of others that I'll focus on. The one on the left is coming out of Jira, and that's measuring team sort of predictability, if you will. It's a team velocity. The gray bar represents what the team signed up to do in each sprint in terms of number of points, and the green bar represents what they actually delivered. And so you see over time this convergence to where the team is able to deliver what they plan and plan what they can deliver. And you want to watch out, for instance, on the left-hand side of this chart, where you have big discrepancies between what the team thinks they can do and what they're actually able to get done. We work with a lot of executives, and almost all of them, everybody wants to go faster. There's no doubt about that. But in my experience, what is really valued almost more than speed is predictability. And the senior executives that we work with really hate it when they're in the position of making a commitment to a partner or to a customer or to another part of the organization, and then they're unable to meet those commitments. Makes them look really bad, puts them in a really awkward position. They want to be able to make commitments with some confidence and hit them. And this little story I like to tell is, imagine you're driving to California or something, and one day you go 100 miles, and the next day you go 300 miles, and the next day you go no miles, and the next day you go 400 miles. When are you going to get to California? And the answer is, have no idea. Like there's no predictable amount of progress that I make from one day to the next. And so it's very difficult for me to know when I'm going to get there. And that's the situation I've got on the left-hand side here, where, one sprint we deliver 5 points, the next sprint we deliver 20 points, the next sprint we deliver no points, the next sprint we deliver 15 points. When are we going to be done with this effort? There's no idea, right? There's no predictability there. So if that's an issue with some of your teams, then you might measure that. Okay. On the right-hand side here, went to a client site recently, and they had big screens up on the wall that showed builds. Which teams were building, how often they were building, were the builds successful, builds that had failed. They were heavy into DevOps and heavy into automation and engineering practices, and you could, these were huge screens that were out there for everyone to be able to see all of the builds that have happened and the failures and all that kind of thing. This is like real time, almost sort of stock market like data of all the builds that are going on. And if you want to encourage teams to check in code more frequently, build more frequently, test more frequently, run automated tests more frequently, then you can use the measurement tools to kind of get those behaviors going. The behaviors you get are going to be driven a lot by what it is you put the measurement focus on. Okay, I want to give a little case study now, a real life example from a Fortune 500 company that we've worked with in the last couple of years to show how all of this sort of plays out when you put it together. I want to start with a very particular business problem first. The problem here is that the company's mobile app ranking and perception are kind of mid-pack compared to their competitors. Market research has been done by independent firms, and they sort of rank the mobile apps in this particular space. And this client's mobile apps rankings aren't that great. They're kind of in the middle, right? And this poses a problem for them. They get fewer downloads of the app, less usage of the app, potentially lost sales from the app, and maybe some brand perception issues, right? So that's the business problem at hand. And then we have a delivery problem down below. And that is the business side of all the project funding and approval and requirements and governance and all of that stuff make it very difficult to respond quickly to this situation. So I've got a situation that's come up. New market research has come out. Our mobile app is mid-pack. We're concerned by how that makes us look in the marketplace, but our internal governance and project management and business side and funding doesn't really allow us to address this quickly. So how do we attack, both of these problems, if you will? Well, the first thing we would do is to make the flow of requirements and features and capabilities visible. This is a big visual wall, and each of these cards represents a feature or a capability or an MVP. And notice that we are tracking MVPs or features independently of each other. We're trying to get away from project thinking and delivering an entire project of work to lots of small deliveries of features and capabilities. I may fund all of these at a project level. I may have a project that's worth millions of dollars that needs to deliver a whole bunch of features, but that doesn't mean that those features need to be deployed simultaneously. So that's one thing I would caution you to get in your mind is a project doesn't have to equal a release. A project can have many, many releases. I could have a project that may last a couple of years, but deliver something every day or every week or every month into production. So in this picture, we're able to track the features that are part of these projects and see them independently flowing and migrating towards delivery. But which one of these should we do? We've just gotten this mobile app ranking problem, and of all these features out here, what's the right one or two to do to fix the problem immediately? So we can do some impact mapping around this. And the problem over on the left is, we want to improve our mobile ranking. There are some influencers related to that, people who are purchasing on the mobile app, people who are searching on the mobile app. And we can go through the impact mapping assessment. Like I said, that's out of the scope of our discussion today. We have got another webinar on this, and there's a lot of information out there on this topic of impact mapping. But once you go through the impact mapping, you get to the far right, and there are some specific problems that we could address immediately. And you see in the middle of the impact map, it says Apple Pay / Apple Wallet and Android Pay, for example. Making purchasing easier, faster, more flexible on the mobile app. This organization felt was going to be very impactful in terms of improving the usability of the app and improving the scoring of the app relative to the competitors. So then we can go through the weighted shortest job first, and of all of the things that we could do. So if I were to show you the full impact map here on the right-hand side, it would have a whole bunch of things that we could do that we think could be impactful. Well, which one do we do exactly? Well, on the right-hand side, we can go through the weighted shortest job first. I don't know exactly what it's going to cost, and I don't know exactly what the upside is going to be to all these, but I can rank them relative to each other based upon the guesses that we have and the information that we have available to us, and determine, what are the one or two things that we can do right now that are going to be the most impactful. So then we focus the delivery army, if you will, on just getting that one thing out the door, right? And instead of batching everything up and trying to do them all and fixing everything way off in the future, perhaps we can deploy one thing immediately. And it turns out one of the big problems that we had in this process, as I said, though, was the business lead time. right? How long it takes the business to approve and define the problem so that IT could even start on it. Given that that was a problem in the value stream, that was a major bottleneck, we focused some of the measurement attention on that. So you see in the upper left-hand side here, one of the things we started measuring was business side velocity. We're all used to, I think, to measuring the IT delivery velocity. But if the problem is on the business side, you might measure business velocity. How quickly and how often is the business able to get features, capabilities, stories defined and approved so that IT can actually start to develop them? And so we measured that, put some improvements and process changes in place there, and got about somewhere between 60 and 70% improvement in the business side velocity. Once we're able to do that, we can take the feature that we decided that we're going to implement, in this case, Apple Pay, Apple Wallet, and implement that very quickly, both from a business standpoint, because we get the approvals and the definitions done quickly, and then using Agile from an IT delivery standpoint, able to just focus the team on one small thing and getting that thing done. And we put that into production, and you're able now down on the lower left to see immediate business impact from that. I changed one thing, I changed it very quickly, and I can already start to see usage of that feature and revenues coming in from that feature. And so now you can see how we're able to deploy on a more granular level and measure business impact on a more granular level. You see some of the numbers there in the middle in terms of measuring the days that it takes to do each of these things, and what some of the upside was: 100%, 108% increase in usage, $8 million in revenue from deploying this one feature, and accelerating the business side velocity here to go from 22 days from when we started the requirements to when IT could start developing the solution, which is fast for a lot of large organizations. Once again, I want to remind you, this is Fortune 500 sort of organization. Sometimes things can be a little slow in some of those kinds of environments. All right, so that's an example of getting to this, using the measurements to get more granular delivery and measuring more granular output. And one of the last topics I want to talk about is strategic change and using metrics for change management. I wanted to caution at the beginning about not measuring each and every silo and function in great detail, but measuring up at a higher level across the value stream in order to get the organization as a whole to function more quickly and more smoothly and work with each other for fast delivery. So up in the top box here are some measures that we've seen used with good impact in terms of driving organizational change. We've had the luxury and the privilege of working with some great change leaders over the years, and these are some of the metrics they've used. Back in the old days, a long time ago, Gregor Baylor, CIO at Capital One, was measuring days per release and dollars per release as sort of high-level metrics that were going to drive how the whole organization had to change. He had really high goals around those numbers, like 50% improvements in days per release. And so it wasn't measuring each individual function, but how long from when we start on something to when it goes into production, and everyone had to play a part in making that work. Mark Schwartz at Citizenship and Immigration liked to use delivery frequency. Wanted to see at the very beginning of the Agile journey there, everyone delivering at least every quarter. And once we got everyone delivering every quarter, then we're going to make everyone deliver every month. And now you've got many teams that are delivering much more frequently than that. So using the overall delivery frequency to drive. I've seen folks use WIP as a way to drive organizational change. Let's just measure how many projects we've got going on at the same time, and then at the team level, how many stories are teams working on at once. Trying to get both of those numbers to go down, knowing that if we get the WIP down, we'll probably get increased flow, increased throughput, and faster delivery. Business side velocity, I just talked about using that as a way to accelerate the business side of the house. years ago, Nationwide Insurance used a first test run pass rate as a way to drive increased quality. Like when I went into formal test, I wanted to see very high rates of test passage, and they got that up in well into the 90-something%. Using agile techniques and the ability to test early and often and frequently, and such that when things went into formal environments, they worked, right? And other organizations using just a percentage of projects that are even using Agile as a metric to drive overall organizational agility. The next thing I want to talk about is the organization's problems are going to change over time. And so don't get stuck using the same metrics year after year after year and trying to make them perfect. Find out where the problems are in the value stream. Focus metrics on those problems. As soon as you get that problem working a little bit, being less of an issue and start to address that problem, the problems will move to other parts of the value stream, and then you refocus the metrics on that. I think Mark Schwartz at Citizenship and Immigration was a master at that, of changing the target. The problem is always moving around, and there are always problems, and just turning the measurement system towards the problems that you're having. Down at the bottom again, once again, there's just this avoid that local optimization. Locally optimizing is going to actually slow you down. If every function tries to be perfect, you'll have an extraordinarily slow delivery time frame. Everyone will only be trying to hit their numbers, and it will make it difficult to achieve overall throughput. So focus on the value stream, point the metrics at that. Once you get that solved or get that working better, the problem will move, and then you'll want to change the metrics to deal with the problem of the day. The goal always being, I think, towards more granular delivery, more granular measurement, so that we can learn better what the right things to build are. As I said at the beginning, a lot of time and money is spent building things that no one actually uses. And that, to me, is the greatest opportunity for us to improve. So that's all I have for now. We've got a few minutes to take a couple of questions.
Hi, Roland. Thanks for that. We do have a couple of questions. Before we get to that, though, I did just want to say thank you to everybody who is online right now. Thanks for bearing with us on that little sound issue there. If you have any questions for us, remember to go ahead and submit those at the right-hand side of your screen. Just click on that button to type. And you can look out for the next webinar in early April, and we will send you details on where to find that information after we close here. We do plan to have our third session of the Agile Leadership Academy on March 12th and 13th. That's coming up very soon. That session will focus on lean product management and design. That includes a site visit to a company that is currently practicing Agile methods, a full-day workshop, and lots of networking opportunities for you. So more details on registration coming to you later. In events land, we are preparing for Lean Agile 2018. That's Lightspeed's own niche conference. It's a one-day affair. We have 2 tracks of really amazing content centered around Agile engineering and DevOps this year. We've got lots of awesome sponsors. We've got our speaker roster filling out here, but the call for speakers is still open. So if you are interested in submitting a session talk, we will have a submission form coming to you when we close here. You can check out last year's highlights at leanagiledc.com and give us a shout at lsevents@lightspeed.com if you're interested in speaking or sponsoring for this year. And if you're interested in digging a little bit deeper on anything that we've covered today, links to the webinar recording and our contact information is going to come to you after we close. We will go ahead and take some of those questions, but be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter and join us next time. All right, so this one is going back to the formula that you had up there. Are the numbers assigned to UBV, TC, etc. In that formula, the WSJF formula, an arbitrary scale, or is there a recommended approach to weighting and rating things?
Basically, it's just, you could think of it as in the same way in Agile, we estimate user story points using a just a numeric scale where one is often the smallest unit of work or the smallest, simplest user story. Another user story is a 3-pointer, it's 3 times as much work as the 1-pointer, so on and so forth. It's the same, exact same idea. So you could use a Fibonacci scale, or you could use a doubling sequence, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't really matter what scale you use, so long as you use the same scale on all of the factors. So you could use Fibonacci for all of the columns, or use doubling for all of the columns, for example. A lot of information on the weighted shortest job first out there, but that's the basic idea. It's just to use point estimation in the same way we would for user stories, but across all of these different economic factors.
Awesome. And can you remind us what that acronym stands for again?
Weighted shortest job first.
Awesome. All right. The next question that we have here. I understand the reasoning for measuring one thing at a time, but when dealing with very large systems where it's known that many changes are necessary, single threading actually draws out the timeline to a point where it's not tolerable at the CIO, CTO level. Your comments on that?
I mean, if that's the situation that you have, then you may have to deal with it. So maybe if you can't do one feature or fix at a time, I would caution against thinking about it this way. I would caution against saying, well, I can't do one feature at a time, therefore I'm going to have one big release at the end of the year. And so automatically going to very big infrequent releases. So I think the question is, how frequently can you release? And getting down to that level. Can I release every 2 weeks? I've seen some extraordinarily large systems releasing every 2 weeks. Oftentimes in large organizations that are releasing at that frequency, you're probably not changing a whole lot of things at once in a couple of weeks, for example. And so that would still allow you to get some granularity, a little bit more granularity of measurement. So I guess the question is, if you can't do a feature at a time, what can you do? And trying to get smaller rather than larger, if at all possible. Obviously, if doing lots of small releases requires DevOps practices, automated deployments, and all that sort of thing, doing that by hand and have it be a manual process is definitely going to be burdensome. And that's where some of the DevOps tools and techniques can make frequent delivery, hopefully a low marginal cost, that it doesn't take a lot of extra time and money to deploy something when you have the automation in place.
Thanks, Roland. We've got a couple of questions coming in about the circle diagram. One of them is, what is that technique called? And the other one is, just can you quickly review the spider web there?
Okay, so I can go back to that slide there, I think, if that would be helpful. So we're talking about this one?
Yes.
On the left. I don't know what it's called. I call it Roland's Agile Kaleidoscope is what I've called it in the past, because I use it for all kinds of things. So I don't know that it has a good tool. You could call it a radar tool or radar map, for example. Might be one way to think about it. And so that was that. And then the other thing is, for me, it's just a way to tease out different kinds of work that I would put into those different pie sections, and then the timing of that work. Those circles could represent, weeks or months or quarters or something. You can set it up however you want to set it up, and measure just all kinds of things with it. But it's just a great visual for trying to show when different kinds of work are happening across different areas, and to see them all coming sort of towards the center, and to make it very clear to people that this isn't going to work from a capacity standpoint, is usually what I try to use it for.
Awesome. I hope that answers your questions. Next question here. What have you seen be the most successful measure to look at?
I think the one that I like the most is just overall cycle time. How long does it take the organization from when it decides it wants to do something until I can able to launch that feature or that capability or that functionality into production, and finding out where those bottlenecks are en route. So to the extent that I can make that whole situation move faster, I can deliver value more frequently to my customers. I'm able to measure with greater granularity. I'm able to deliver with greater granularity. And that forces all the parts of the organization to have to work much more closely together and avoid big batches and big handoffs and silos. So I like that, overall cycle time as the thing to focus on.
Thanks, Roland. We'll go ahead and take one more question here. In terms of SAFe, how do you determine PI objectives and business value?
So that's great. So this is, if you take the SAFe class or the SAFe certification exams, and we are SAFe Gold Partner, and we do a lot of SAFe training, and I'm one of our SAFe trainers. One of the modules in the SAFe training is the weighted shortest job first. They didn't invent it, but they do teach it. As I said, a lot of that comes from Don Reinertson. But the weighted shortest job first is how SAFe says that you would prioritize the work. And so that's work that would happen outside of PI planning before. So the way SAFe works is that we have our business product managers and business executives come into PI planning giving the goals and priorities for the next PI. So the question is, well, how do they determine what those goals and priorities are? Well, the SAFe recommendation is to use the weighted shortest job first, that they would have those discussions before they come into PI planning as a way to determine what the features and goals of the upcoming next PI should be.
All right. Well, Roland, thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you guys for coming and attending. Again, thanks for bearing with us on that little audio issue there. I think that's all the time we have for questions right now, but if you still have something that you wanted to discuss with us, send us a shout at operations@lifespeed.com. We'd be happy to talk with you further. And with that, I think we are good to go. We will see you guys later.